You want to hear something that's a little bit wild? Me actually doing this episode, having it inspired by a song. Like, it's a little bit weird. It's not something that you'd expect me to say, but well, I guess that's kind of what happened. So, like, this morning I was actually listening to Kaspar Nyovest's breakout hit, Dokshe Beleza, from like way back in 2014. And if you watch the official music video, it usually starts with him saying, "This is not a story about the hood. This is a story about a thug living with 6 wives and one dangerous man in the hood." And then after that, that's when he goes and is like, "I'm Shebeleza, dark, Shebeleza, Shebeleza." And, that's when he kind of goes into it. Then the song begins, blah, blah, blah. But the interesting part about that intro is that was actually sort of the nail in the coffin to me making this episode. Because when I was actually thinking about talking about this entire topic, there was sort of a thought process behind it. But anyways, let me put a bit of context to this. So welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is Denver B. This is a much shortened version of the typical episodes that I do. I like to keep it simple, raw, get rid of the instrumentals, minimal editing. It's just me talking on the mic and pretty much giving my thoughts for a couple of minutes here and there. And the meat of this episode, pretty much everything that we're going to discuss, is actually based off of a discussion that I had on a different episode, which kind of left me thinking. Because I actually don't think people think I do this, but when I talk about something, not only do I think about it before I talk about it, but a lot of times I tend to think about the stuff that I talk about after I talk about them. And when I did episode 438, which is, like the second episode backwards from this one, I did kind of leave the episode with still a little bit of thought on one of the things I was talking about. Now, for those of you all that didn't listen to it, I was busy talking about the 5 controversial beliefs and opinions that people have when it comes to cheating and cheaters. So I looked into some of the more common ones that people usually say, stuff like you can't cheat on your partner and still love them, and cheating is a part of man's nature, and women cheat better or they cheat worse than men. And, I kind of went into a bunch of those statements and, I kind of broke them down and debunked whether they're true or false. Could be a little bit true, could be a little bit false. But there was one that I covered which is, I guess, believed by quite a lot of people, mostly because they don't entirely understand it. But it was the whole talk of people who cheat, or more so men who cheat, should be in open relationships or poly relationships. Poly being short for polyamorous. But for the most part, people usually tend to go towards, being a polygamous relationship. And I can remember talking about it. And what I said was, most people don't understand open relationships. And they actually don't get that open relationships are a lot harder than closed ones, because the major connecting tissue, the main fuel of the relationship, is actually trust. Because if you can't trust your partner, then, they will pretty much just be screwing around, and you'll just be there possibly for some level of emotional comfort or some shit. And that was when I gave the rules and stuff like that. And for the most part, I kind of just chalked it down to, it's big on trust, and people who cheat aren't, the most trustworthy people. And so they wouldn't survive in such relationships. And I kind of tried to group the open and the poly relationships almost together, mostly because I didn't want to over-explain more than one concept and possibly confuse people, but mainly because of time. Because, I usually tend to stick to particular timelines whenever I'm doing episodes. And I didn't want to take so much time on that point that I wouldn't have enough time to explain the others. But finishing the episode, having it go out there and everything and getting some of the feedback from people, I actually had been thinking about it, and to be honest, I don't think I gave too much thought to the polygamous relationship, because most of what I said about the polygamous relationship is that, a person who's cheating, you put them in a polygamous relationship, they'll just be a polygamous man that fucks around, and that won't really change too much. But now at that point, yes, I said that, I put it on the episode, but I have actually been thinking about it afterwards. And, I was wondering, what if I am actually wrong? What if, the more the merrier is actually a thing. And some of these guys, maybe they like two babes at the same time. Maybe he's in love with both women, or all three of the women, or all four of the women, and he decides that if he had all of them and they were all sort of cooperating with each other, then he probably wouldn't have a reason to fuck around. Like, that thought process has actually fallen prey to my thinking. And to be honest, I kind of have been thinking about it for a little bit, because you can't say that just because a guy is cheating, that means that he's always going to cheat, It doesn't mean that, just because he's cheating on his main babe, it means that all he wants to do is fuck around, I spoke about how different people will cheat differently for different reasons. There's some guys that will go and they'll fuck around with every single babe that is walking down the road. She looks super fine, or she has a nice body, or she has a pretty face, whereby, if she looks at him, she smiles, she'll end up slipping and, she'll land with her vagina onto his dick. Stuff like that can happen. And, that one, you can clearly see that it's a case of sexual variety for the guy. But there are those times when you find that there's a guy who isn't satisfied in a relationship for one reason or another. Probably there's something that the partner isn't giving them, or the partner isn't understanding, or the partner doesn't listen. But for the most part, everything else is okay. So because, the relationship itself seems mostly stable, but the guy isn't entirely happy or satisfied, he ends up finding the satisfaction and the happiness in another babe. Not that he doesn't love the other woman, but because he seems to be getting more satisfaction from this other babe, then all of a sudden you can see now that this guy starts to gravitate towards this other woman, and it's almost like he's trying to keep both relationships running, almost at a main to main level, not main to side chick. All right. And at that point in time, you think about it, maybe there is space for polygamy, and maybe some of these cheaters would be pretty well off being polygamous. I know there's a story of an IT guy who actually has two wives who cooperate, who are together, who are friends, and the guys managed to be polygamous this entire time, with two wives, and they all seem happy as a throuple of sorts, or, what you'd call a polygamous couple. But now the question is, just because, this guy screwed around and the wife was sort of open to the idea of having, a second wife, or, a co-wife, does it mean that when a lot of guys cheat like this, that they'll actually be better off polygamous? So I kind of had to think through that thought for a little bit, because on one end, whenever you find a guy who's busy entertaining multiple women, there's always going to be a threshold somewhere. There's a point at which, as a guy, if you are entertaining multiple babes, laying pipe with multiple babes at the same time, you will get to a point where you're like, yo, I think this is too much. Let me just retain the ones that I have now, if you have some sort of restraint. There's some guys that'll just fuck everything. But if you are entertaining multiple women, there is going to be a point in time where you kind of feel like, yes, this baby is fine, but, I pretty much have my hands full. And at that point in time, you kind of think about it. Maybe being in a polygamous relationship can actually work, because if you're having like 2-3 babes, like 2-3 wives, actually I'll just call them babes. Imagine you have 2-3 babes that you're dating all at the same time, and you're entertaining all of them. Their BS, their loving nature, their niceness. Whoever it is that has periods will have periods at that time. You can go and bang the others and shit. Like, you're pretty much having to deal with having multiple girlfriends. Does that mean that you will cheat? And to be very honest, thinking about it, much as the idea of that, and maybe, the possible orgies that can come in seem like such a good idea for some guys, I don't know. Like, my thoughts about polygamy and guys who cheat not being particularly good, even when polygamous, might have been wrong. But at the same time, when I think of the opposite of that argument, which is, men who cheat would probably be better off polygamous, I don't think that's entirely right. I actually don't. Mostly because, when I kind of think about it, when you look at it, there are still some guys that even when entertaining 1-2 babes on a constant level, will still fuck around with a bunch of others. Like, there's some guys that can quite literally play 2 babes, have the both of them thinking that they're in a relationship, and he's still cheating on both of them with a bunch of other one-night stands here and there. Like, I think about such people and you're like, even though you were to give him another 2 babes to sort of be with, who says that he won't continue trying to chase the next piece of new pussy that's out there? And when you look at such people, when you think about them, then maybe the whole polygamy argument doesn't really work for them. Probably doesn't. But at the same time, there's the guy that will go and will cheat on his babe with another babe, but no one else. He is cheating because this other babe, or at least he's presumably cheating with this other babe because this other babe seems to be giving him something that the main girlfriend that his partner isn't giving to him. And I guess maybe that's the 20% that most people are deficient in when it comes to relationships that they're in. That some people end up risking an entire relationship for. Some people, in this case, being the people who cheat. So maybe those ones can probably work well in a polygamous relationship. Because maybe at that point, they'll feel complete. Because what they feel that they're unable to get from one, they can probably get from the other. And vice versa. But still, even then, when I think about polygamy and I think about where polygamy has mostly worked, which is, with communities that are mostly towards Islam, such as the Somalis and so on, it still kind of brings up the one thing that makes polygamy extremely hard to do by most people out here. And when you think about it, you actually sort of realize that that's actually the main reason why even the thought of your partner entertaining the idea of multiple other partners in the relationship is almost always going to be non-existent. And that is the fact that most people do not know how to treat other people equally. If I can kind of put it like that. Like, if you look at the concept of polygamy in Islam, it's supposed to be equal treatment by Islamic law, or according to Islam, through and through. If you're buying a house for one, you're buying a house for both. If you're buying a car for one, you're buying a car for both. If you're buying a gift for one, you're buying a gift for both, which is usually supposed to be of the same exact value. And that in and of itself might seem like it's very possible for some, but it's very difficult for most. Because a lot of times, most people, whenever it comes to having a desire or a certain caring for someone, will never have it at the same level for more than one person. You'll love someone a little bit more than the other. You'll treat someone a little bit better than you'll treat someone else. And even though you could try to do your best to ensure that it's equal on both sides, one side, based on whatever case-by-case basis is going to happen, will definitely feel at some point or another that the other person is getting better treatment than them. And there can be some sort of resentment, which is why a lot of people have said that polygamous families never really have the best relations between each other, because there's one side that always feels like the other side got it better than them. And the other side will always feel like, you stole the husband, blah, blah, blah. You stole our father, blah, blah, blah. And that always kind of brings up some sort of internal issues between some people. Granted, there are certain systems in place around some cultures that practice it to, handle such matters. But for the most part, the possible lack of equal treatment by the man, as well as the desired special treatment by the women from the man, is what's going to be the biggest hindrance to the idea of polygamy, mostly for women, but also for some men. And to kind of conclude all of this, I guess like most things when it comes to relationships, there is no real definitive answer. When you look at it, yes, polygamy could solve some of the cheating issues amongst some people. But at the same time, that could come at the expense of the women that you're with, as well as the children, especially since children tend to develop better in a monogamous family as opposed to a polygamous one. Although, then again, maybe I might be wrong about all of this shit, or I don't know what the hell I'm saying, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime, on Westside, on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.